Hi guys, this is Jorge, head coach at E3 Tri Coaching, and in this quick video I'm just gonna teach you what are kind of like the best practices of training with power, with a power meter. Basically, when you get a power meter, one of the first things that I recommend you to do is you're gonna get an app, and I recommend you to get the app right away and connect it to your new device once the battery is charged, because you want to see if the latest firmware is installed on your device. If it's not, just run through the instructions, install the software, the firmware, and then you're going to be good to go. Also, the app is a great way to just sometimes make diagnostics. If something it's like not working well, do a little bit of troubleshooting. So after you got your device with firmware, you make sure that you have the latest version and all of that stuff. Obviously, you connect it to whatever is going to be your bar computer. You might have a Wahoo or a Garmin, so it doesn't matter what you have. Now you just need to pretty much go into your new device, turn your power meter on. Basically what it means, if you have something like pedals, cranks, basically what it means is you just need to spin the crank, and once you turn it off, you go into your device. Basically you just add a new device. They're gonna have on the settings, is gonna kind of like guide you through it. Oftentimes it's just kind of like look for whatever device is on, or might ask you want to add like a heart rate or a power meter or whatever it is. So go through the process, pair it, and then once you have pair it, then a lot of times both Wahoo and Garmin will give you an option whether you want to set the auto calibrate option on. If your device has it, I heavily recommend it to do it. If you all the time before you start your ride, as soon as you turn your power meter and your computer, they're gonna detect each other, and Garmin or Wahoo are gonna tell you like, do you want to calibrate? You just say yes. It takes a few seconds, it gets calibrated, and then you make sure that you're always getting the most accurate data. It's gonna help me, it's gonna help you, so, or your coach, so it's gonna be awesome. So please do that. If it doesn't have it, it becomes a best practice that you always calibrate your power meter before you do a ride. Now, once you have installed it, one very thing that is very important on the settings once you finalize your installation is that you need to make sure that the crank size or the wheel size is properly set up when you are getting the settings on your Garmin or Wahoo. So, for instance, for the pedals, it's going to ask you for the crank size, and if you don't give the proper crank size, that you just can look at your crank, usually on the inside it's going to have a number. It might go anywhere between 175 to 165 millimeters, which is just the length of the arm of the crank, and basically that's going to allow for the device to properly calculate power more accurately. If you don't set your crank size or your wheel size on, you're just gonna set the default, and let's say usually it's 172.5 for crank arm length, but you happen to be riding, like most new tri bikes are coming with shorter cranks, which helps for your fit. So let's say you have 165 millimeters. Now you're gonna get an inflated number that obviously is gonna give you a little bit of a false sense that you might be stronger than you really are. So you don't want to do that. Once you already go through that, one thing as you are going to start training with your power is through your device. You're going to set up your screens to see what information you're going to be getting. So a very important thing also on the during the setup process is you want to set up the recording option to 1 second, meaning every time your power meter is talking to your computer, is sending the information, and basically you're just telling the device how often you want to be recording the data. Recording is different to display data, so recording is very important. You want to set it to 1 second. Some other devices, they have some other features, and basically what it does is just ended up fudging the numbers a little bit, and you don't want that. You just want to get as accurate information, so set it up to record every 1 second. Okay, now for display, now this is where you get a little bit of options. So for display, again, anybody who's trained with power knows that the power is very jumpy, because when we're generating power, we're putting power into the crank arm and on the other, and it's creating torsion on the metal or the carbon, and the device, whether they're pedals or crank or wheel, are kind of like trying to determine those things to estimate your power or calculate your power. And because of that, it's gonna be very jumpy. So one leg might be a little bit stronger than the other. You might be going up a hill, you're gonna be down a hill, headwind, whatever. So what you can do for the display, again, record every 1 second. Display, you can set up the display. Most of the devices have options for like display every 1 second, which is going to be super jumpy. You can display it every 3 seconds, which is basically taking your power every 3 seconds and averaging. So now it becomes a little bit less jumpy, or you can go all the way to like average every 10 seconds. So I normally advise athletes to set the display to be display every 3 to 10 seconds, because now that allows you to keep that power just a little bit less jumpy. And is the power that you're seeing there is going to be a better representation of really where you are, versus seeing like 200 and 100 and 200 and 100. It's going to make it a little bit better. Other things that you can do for display is what sort of information you want to get. So you can get your standard, distance, time, speed, cadence, heart rate. But for power specifically, you want to get the display, again, averaging every 3 to 10 seconds of average power. So what's your average power, which is going to tell you exactly what you did for the session. Now, there's other metrics that all these devices have, and they're called something like normalized power or training stress score or whatever it is. Well, something like normalized power, basically what it is an algorithm that is taking a rolling average of all the power that you're generating from where you're pedaling super hard, when you're pedaling super easy, and everything in between. And that what is telling us is a more, in certain instances, a more precise representation of what your body is feeling, physiologically speaking, in terms of the metabolic strain, meaning how you need to generate power, convert fuel into energy so you can go up a hill, down a hill, or whatever. So a quick example is if you ride on a flat course and you don't stop, and the power meter tells you that you average 150 watts, well, that's a very good representation of what you did, because there was not a lot of variability and there was non-stops. So when you're doing a ride, in training, and we're riding outdoors, we're going through stop signs, stop lights, traffic, stopping for refueling. We might be riding with friends, so sometimes we might be drafting, or sometimes we may be in front. There's going up hills, down hills. So taking an example again, if now you do, let's say you ride up a hill for 10 minutes, and then you ride down a hill for 10 minutes, the average for that might be, let's say again, 150 watts. But the reality is, let's say when you're going up the hill, it was pretty steep. So you were actually riding at 300 watts. And when you were going down the hill, you were not pedaling a lot. So let's say you only average 100 watts. So the average for that thing ended up being 150 watts. But physiologically speaking, to create the energy to go up a hill, is not that you're just generating twice as much power, 300 watts to go up a hill. Physiologically speaking, is exponentially a lot harder. It might be on the order of maybe 3 to 4 times. Feels harder to your body to go from one wattage to another level. So your normalized power is going to be taking that into consideration. So instead of, while your average power might have been 150 watts, the normalized power might tell you that it felt more like 180 watts. So that's what exactly normalized power is trying to do. Give you a better representation of how an effort felt in spite of stops, or when you were not pedaling or whatever, for the conditions, because you're riding outdoors and you need to be safe. Now, in training, oftentimes a normalized power can give us a better representation of what the effort felt, because it's gonna take into consideration all those variables. So a good thing when you have your device, you might have a couple of screens. One can give you the live data, so your live average power, average every like 3 to 10 seconds, whatever you ended up choosing. Your normalized power is giving you how the whole ride is going, but then you may select another screen in which you have the lap information. So if you're doing a workout and the workout tells you that you're going to be sometimes at X power and another time at a Y power, you just start hitting laps every time you're switching for whatever intensity is required given the workout. And now you can always compare to see what's like, well, the total ride, it was giving me this amount of data, but now for these chunk of the ride, for these 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 miles or whatever it is, now this is what I know exactly what I'm doing in there. So you have the lap average power and the lap normalized power, and that way you can always keep an eye on the big picture, what the whole thing is happening, and then you can narrow it into what's happening on a given interval. So whether I'm riding indoors or outdoors, I'm always have a couple of displays to give me that data. And then every time especially if I'm doing intervals, I'm looking at the lap data because I want to know that if I need to shoot for 200 watts for an interval, that I'm staying around there. It might be a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but I want to be somewhere around there. If I'm riding outdoors, same deal. I want, because it might be hills or whatever, so I want to make sure that I'm where I need to be. And then on race day, those two numbers, normalized and average, you do want them to be as close to one another. Because if they're very separated, what it means is that at times you were really spiking your power above of what it was the goal, and at times you were really dropping your power below what was the goal. So in training, we want to keep big picture, and most of the time we might be looking mostly at normalized versus average power. Those two become a little bit more important on races. You do want those numbers to be close to one another, but that would start to giving you a better idea of what sort of efforts you can sustain given the training that we're doing. So as a quick summary, always make sure that you are updating the firmware on your device. Also make sure that always when you install your power meter, you put the right crank size, the right wheel size if it requires, because it's going to give you the best power numbers. Set the recording to record every 1 second. And always calibrate your power meter before you start riding. Again, it takes a few seconds, super easy, so get onto a habit of doing that. And then get familiar with your power meter, check the different displays that you can check or see, and other metrics, we'll be discussing them on another time. So I hope you find this useful. Let me know if you have any questions, and train smart.